Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me start with Judge Eccles and just ask that, well, let me first state that I hope that there will be funding for projects other than those that are maybe further along than the Texas T-bone. And if you could apply right now for federal funding and part of this stimulus, what would you ask for it to do?
Today, our biggest need is the market and route environmental and engineering studies. Before we go on the ground with a system, we want to make sure it's a system that will be viable, will have the market that will support the system. Unlike the East Coast, we don't have regular service between Houston and Dallas today. And so to develop one, we need to make sure that we are building this system which can be priced so that we can compete with the automobiles, with the aircraft, and also to keep an operational system. I do think bringing the discipline of the marketplace to the system can help set a fair schedule and a construction, of the technology that will make sense and would be viable for the long term for the state.
Well, let me ask Mr. Sabo. I'm looking at a map of basically the Amtrak system with the high-speed corridors that have been designated, the 11 that have been designated in the darker red. And is this the beginning of a planned system, that those are investments that are already being made? And do you favor the ones that are already in the Amtrak system being upgraded to high speed, or are you looking at other factors like a new high-speed rail project that might feed into Amtrak and therefore enhance Amtrak's capabilities?
One of the next steps that we absolutely must take is the development of a national rail plan. And when I say that, I mean it from a most comprehensive standpoint. We have to understand how high-speed rail is going to overlay on traditional intercity rail, how commuter rail is going to overlay on top of that. And frankly, we have to understand how it's going to interact with the freight rail network. So there are all these components that need to be looked at to ensure that we have a comprehensive strategy when it comes to rail. You can't talk about high-speed rail without talking about the impact on the freights. That map is a document that happens to exist today, but certainly there's the need for a much bolder, clearer vision and a national strategy on how to get there.
Have you ever talked or even put on the table with the Amtrak corridors that do share freight rail lines, which make for problems
yes.
Of on-time service, which then cause problems at the fare box? Have you ever put on the table sharing the space and adding a line on the same corridor as the freight rail, which if you could get a reasonable deal, like maybe free use of that space in exchange for getting out of the freight rail system, which they would certainly benefit them because they don't like dealing with Amtrak. Have you ever thought about trying to get a second rail on the same right-of-way as one of the ways for higher speed rail service in highly congested corridors?
Well, I think clearly there's multiple options. The key is that whatever we do, and clearly if we're going to have high-speed rail, true high-speed rail, it has to be on a dedicated corridor. But whatever we do, we're going to have to make sure that we achieve a win-win relationship with the freight industry. We have an obligation to make sure that if the passenger trains are operating, that they're operating on time. Clearly reliability is a very critical component of ensuring a high-quality passenger rail operation and growing ridership.
Have you looked at having a separate track, though, to make that happen? I mean, you can talk about it, but in reality, at least on the Sunset Limited and the Texas Eagle that I know so well, the experience has not been good.
Yeah. I mean, again, any of these options can be considered.
Well, I would ask if in the parameters of the spending of this stimulus money, if that is a factor, if looking at those congested areas where you might be able to get a more streamlined service for higher speed rail, if that might be an option.
Certainly that could be a component that would be measured in a state's application to us. You know, there are clear advantages to that as far as reliability, which is one of the components we we measure, safety, which is one of the components we measure. So again, if that was part of an application, it's a criteria that could be viewed very favorably.
So a state effort is one criteria that would be very important for matching funds, and then possibly if you could ease congestion for better service and higher speed rail in a state application, that would be also a good factor.
That's right, yes.
Judge Echols, let me just ask you if obviously the Texas T-Bone is not going to be looking at an Amtrak route, but are there options on the Texas T-Bone that might provide a dual rail with Freight-Line, or are you looking at a different all-new right-of-way?
Senator, in the very fast track portion of the system, and again, as Mr. Szabo pointed out, Administrator Szabo, the system would have to have its own tracks, and we think the whole system should be a separate track anyway. But as you described, within the urban corridors, particularly as we're working our way into the cities, on the Highway 290 corridor coming into Houston, or on the Hardy Toll Road corridor on the north, we tie in and partner with the Harris County Toll Road Authority, the Texas Department of Transportation, Union Pacific Railroad, the Houston Harris County Metropolitan Transit Authority, the Metro service provider, and the high-speed rail in right-of-way and share a common corridor. And the idea where it's appropriate to lay a track adjacent to the freight railroads, and there's a number of places where that makes a lot of sense, particularly in those urban cores where you have a constricted right-of-way to get into the city through the dense population centers. It makes the most sense for us. As we move out, it depends on the demand that we get from the freight side for the increased capacity in the future. We have found them to be very reluctant to give up that right-of-way, claiming that they need that for future development and it's theirs, and so it's a continuous problem, but we think it makes great sense. We're not for taking a lot of new right-of-way. We'd like to consolidate as much as possible with TxDOT on their right-of-way and with the rail lines to the extent that we can meet the curvature requirements and the technical requirements.
Yes, that's why I just think coming to some realistic terms with the freight rail is going to be in everyone's interest, because they have a business to run, and you can understand their wanting to keep control of their tracks. That's why I think getting sort of separated out where we can, but not having the huge expense of eminent domain and those issues.
There are many places, Senator, where it's cheaper for us to relocate the freight rail and buy them a new right-of-way and a new freight rail corridor and new yards and take over their right-of-way than for us to go try to condemn a new right-of-way somewhere along the line. And there's places where that makes sense for the freight rail as well, and we're working on that in Texas.
Well, thank you very much. My time is up, but I appreciate all of your coming in and helping us get through this, because it is a very important new capability for America to have true multimodal planning for transportation. Thank you.